Hello, everyone on the recording. I wanted to give a brief introduction to reducing stigma in school food programs. I am myself and Krista and Lindsay are your hosts. We are with Tapestry Collective Co-op. We are a FEM-owned worker cooperative that does consulting in the realm of food systems, gender equity, housing, conservation, and the BC Coalition for Healthy School Foods has engaged us to help facilitate this exciting webinar. So thank you for having us, and we're really we've had a wonderful time planning this webinar, and we're very excited to see so many folks showing up for this important topic. Okay, so as we go through the presentation, you'll notice that we have quite a few different engagement options through Menti. So what we would like to do is invite people to either open up a new browser on your whatever internet browser you're using and go to menti.com and enter the code. Or you can also you can also use the QR code and bring it up on your phone. And this will allow you to participate in our question and answer for our speakers. And then we have a few sort of harvesting of learnings that we would like to do through Menti with you at the end. So if you want to engage in that way, we would love it if you can follow along with us through Menti. So if there are any additional questions about that, again, you can direct message Lindsay or Krista, or just pop your question in the chat and we would be happy to help. Okay, so I would like to start us off officially with a land acknowledgement. I personally am here on unceded Secwepemc territory, and I want to acknowledge that food comes from the land and that agriculture and education systems have both been significant tools of oppression. And part of what we would like to do here today is talk about how they can also be tools for liberation. In this, I would also like to acknowledge that our speakers are both non-Indigenous, and for this conversation, in the spirit of avoiding re-stigmatization, we really wanted to revisit and acknowledge what people experiencing discrimination have already shared. Our speakers will present on relation-based processes that aim to give voice to these experiences, and we wanted to lift this up in existing work. We also wanted to recognize Indigenous communities as stewards of land-based food systems and leaders of stigma-free school food systems in many cases. There is a lunch and learn coming up that Sue Ann will share at the end of the webinar that is on Indigenous school food programs. So we're really looking forward to this as well. And as part of our territorial acknowledgement sort of across all participants, we would like you to, if you are signed into the Menti, to go ahead and place a little dot. If you're on your phone or your computer, you can place a dot on the traditional territory that you're located on. And we can get a bit of a sense of where folks are from. And I just want to say there is 2 slides that are going to appear. This one is for folks in so-called BC, and with a larger image for the Lower Mainland. And then the next one is for people who are outside of so-called BC, and we will be sharing folks from broader regions, like giving the opportunity to put your dot on the page. So if you are from a region outside of what's shown on the page, just hold your answer. You don't need to put your dot on right now. So I can see that there are 25 people who've placed dots on the map. So we'll give a few more minutes. And if you can go on there and let us know where you're from, we would be grateful. Okay, we've got 30. I'm going to give it a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And if you really wanted to share your location and didn't get the chance on here, then we can you can share it in the chat. Okay, so same thing, but for folks across Canada, if you've already put your location, you can put it again in BC if you like. But yeah, curious about who's joining us from further afield. Oh, okay, there's a few pins on here. Maybe we have mostly BC folks. Not responding. Okay. Michelle, if you want to put, you can message Krista or Lindsay your location and they can put it in the Menti for you. Got a few thumbs up. Awesome. Okay, so one of the things we noticed with the registration is that there were folks across Canada that were registered, and so we just wanted to welcome those people as well. And if you're watching the recording, we're so happy to be sharing some of the work that's going on in BC. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sam and Brent to give a introduction on the BC chapter.
Great. Thank you so much, Bonnie. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see some familiar faces, see some new names in the chat, a lot of Kristas. So my name is Sam Gambling. I'm the outgoing provincial lead of the BC chapter of the Coalition for Healthy School Food, which is administered by the Public Health Association of BC. And I am calling in from Lekwungen Homelands in so-called Victoria, BC. Just firstly express my gratitude to Bonnie and Krista and Lindsay and the Tapestry team who has put this all together, and to our speakers today. And I'm really grateful as well. Just a note to maybe mute yourself if you're not muted already. Yeah, grateful that you're all spending your afternoon here to talk about this important topic. So for those who are new to the BC chapter, we are a network of more than 60 nonprofit member organizations, as well as hundreds of endorsers, supporters, and school food providers from all corners of the province. We were the first provincial chapter of the National Coalition for Healthy School Foods as of 2018, and our work has involved public outreach and engagement, hosting networking and knowledge sharing events such as this webinar, and hosting all sorts of advocacy campaigns to secure provincial and federal investment in a universal healthy school food program that meets all sorts of guiding principles based on best practices. Bonnie, I'm not sure if you had a slide on the guiding principles, but if not, we can stick them in the chat. Our guiding principles are really they exemplify what our vision is for the future of school food in Canada, which is particularly important given the recent provincial and federal investments of school food. And we will continue to advocate for programs that are health promoting, cost shared, universally accessible, flexible, and adapted to local contexts, supportive of local food procurement and Indigenous food sovereignty, and more. So thanks, Sue-Ann, for posting that in the chat. I encourage you to check them out on our website for more information about what we are working towards here in BC and across Canada. And before I finish up, I just wanted to take a moment and mention a couple of my colleagues who are on the call. So Sue-Ann has been working as the Indigenous lead for the BC chapter and also co-hosts the Indigenous School Food Circle. And Steph Korlick is the incoming provincial organizer for the BC chapter and will be fully taking over leadership of this chapter starting in mid-May. So we're thrilled to have her on board, take our collective advocacy to the next level. And lastly, Brent Mansfield is a longtime school food advocate and steering committee of the BC chapter and has been supporting with strategy and planning. So quickly, I just want to hand it over to Brent to share a bit of context about why it's important to be having this conversation right now on Stigma today.
Great. Thanks, Sam. And so great to see so many of you and be having this important conversation amidst all that's going on in school food in Canada. And I think we can all be excited about the progress we have made towards the coalition's vision in the last 10 and 5 years. And I'm kind of feeling that right now. And it's exciting to be gathering and having these conversations as we see government moving forward, and we want to make sure these key principles that we have organized the coalition around are embedded in all programs moving forward. And talking about universality and stigma and some of these conversations are super important as we move forward with all these different initiatives. So I'm really excited to be supporting the coalition right now. Like Sam mentioned, a big part of that is looking forward, and part of that is funding and vision and looking back at the last 5 years and what we've been able to accomplish, and then now looking forward what we can work on. So it's exciting to see such a high level of engagement in this. We've got our members meeting, for those of you who are members, next Friday, which will be kind of coming back and talking a little bit more around the vision and next steps and opportunities. And we're hoping to do more of these webinars, and we'll tell you about the next one, but also excited to hear some of these key conversations that then we as a coalition can help organize and support this movement building forward. And it really feels exciting to feel like the movement has got us this mandate after 10 years of the national coalition and 5 years of the provincial coalition. And I think we need to build this movement even larger to be able to achieve implementation and the dream of the vision of these programs actually coming to reality in schools. So very excited to be here, and excited to listen in and for the discussion a little bit later on.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brent. So without any further ado, I will introduce to you our first speaker, who is Viveca Ellis. And I have a bio to read for Viveca. I first met Viveca in, I think, 2018 at the United Way Public Policy Institute. So I was very delighted to reconnect with her and bring her back into my sphere with this webinar. So Viveca is a founding member of the Center for Family Equity, which is formerly known until 2023 as the Single Mothers Alliance. In 2014, she banded together with other lone mothers impacted by poverty to mobilize grassroots leadership and advocate for public policy solutions to lone parent and all family poverty in BC. In past roles, Viveca has worked for the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition as the founder and coordinator of the Community Action Network, then led the coalition through the pandemic as interim community organizer until her departure to create the first staff role at what was then the Single Mothers Alliance in 2001. In 2017, Viveca was nominated to the Minister's Advisory Forum on Poverty Reduction to design BC's first poverty reduction strategy, resulting in legislation. So I'm very excited to introduce Viveca, and I will let Viveca share her slides and pass it over to you.
Okay, I am just going to share my screen here, and hold on, if everybody will just give me a second. At this very moment, my son is coming in the door from school, and you might hear him knocking. Hopefully he'll just catch the drift that I am doing a presentation. Okay, hello everybody. Thank you very, very much to the coalition, to the Tapestry Collective, and everybody for the opportunity to present today. I'd like to start out by acknowledging that the Center for Family Equity official offices are located on the unceded, and at our organization, our members decided and voted to use the word stolen Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories. We acknowledge the historical and present day impacts of colonization and recognize that poverty is interwoven with our residential school history. So thank you all. I will carry on without much ado here. I'm just going to try and change the location of this thingamabobber. Is that okay there? Okay. Actually, maybe I'll put it up here. So today I'm going to present on a project that we carried out in 2022 with the Coalition for School Food. And my presentation is called Eliminating Stigma in School Food Program Policy Design and Delivery. So the Center for Family Equity, just briefly, we're a nonprofit that addresses family poverty through community-engaged research, also research partnered with academic institutions. We make policy recommendations to government for upstream, non-charitable upstream approaches to ending poverty. We do law reform and legal action and some limited targeted programs. We do have a very unique organizational structure in that we have a large membership base of low-income parents and caregivers all around the province. We're about just over 400 now, which I don't know if that's a lot or a little to you, but they're all many, very, very active members on many different projects and campaigns, and they are all around the province in many different places. So when we founded as the Single Mothers Alliance back in 2014, and as Bonnie mentioned, I do have lived experience of this issue. That's why I was driven to become an anti-poverty activist, and my career moved on from there. And when we were founding and organizing and starting our collective, we started hearing so much about school food programs just across the board. We heard how much these low-income parents love their programs. We heard about a lot of them who hated their programs. We just heard a lot all the time. We also, heard a lot of information about what they thought could change or needed to change about their school food programs. Some of them were in breakfast, lunch, some of them, the after school programs and also the weekend backpack programs. But one thing we noticed is that they weren't being asked, and they were telling us that nobody was asking them really about their programs. So the thing that we heard the most about from members was stigma, that they felt there were negative attitudes towards them within their school environments and from other parents, that they were in school programs. They were dealing with their children's attitudes towards being in school programs, school food programs that were targeted. And so stigma, I don't know if there's a better definition. I'm sure there is. But just this, to define it, that generally, it's negative attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors about or towards a group of people because of their situation in life. So all of this led to this wonderful collaboration with the Coalition for Healthy School Food, where we partnered up and we carried out some research targeting East Vancouver to really get a sense of the school food experiences of those who were already accessing programs. And the criteria for participation was that they were low income, identified as low income, and accessing a school food program. So we held 3 focus groups. The focus was on inner city schools in Vancouver. We did limit it to Vancouver for this, for most of it. We had 2 virtual focus groups. One we did open up to takers from around BC because there was interest. And the other one we kept specific to Vancouver. And then we held one in person at the Britannia Community Center where we had many come out. So we had a total of 19 diverse parents and caregivers from 13 schools. So one thing that I want to foreground here is that, oh, sorry, where am I here? I'm struggling with this little bar that I actually want to move. I want to get rid of it. There we go. That we can never separate the intersection of race and poverty from regarding school food program uptake. Of the participants in our research, 87% identified as racialized, and within that group, 38% identified as Indigenous. So within, the entire group participants, 76% shared with us that they live on less than $40,000 a year, and majority had 2 children or more. 60% lived on fixed provincial incomes, disability, or income assistance. So we know that those incomes are far, far below the poverty line. So 4 themes emerged based on their responses to the notion of a universal school food program. So we were going to these participants and asking them about their experience of their existing school food program, but we also wanted to get their vision and their feedback and their input into what a universal school food program would mean to them. So just to let everybody know that is how the discussion was structured. So there were 4 main themes: access to food as a value, school food for all. They love the notion of the universality of school food for all. And the third major theme was no more shame. And this was the one that was most striking to us. And the 4th one was value for parents, that it saves time and money. So I'm mainly going to talk about the third main theme here of no more shame. So what we heard from these individuals and the participants was a lot about their struggles accessing subsidies and programs that provided subsidies, where there was a fee and then there was a subsidy if you were low income. They found it very hard to find out about the subsidies. It was confusing to access them. Intake was unclear, who qualified, who didn't, what the income cutoffs were. Some people knew about the subsidies and how to apply, others had no idea. So we actually had 2 mothers sitting side by side, one at the same school. One had been both low income. One had been accessing the school program for years, and the other didn't even know that she could access it. So kind of a disaster on that level. A lot of language was used, like humiliating, that application processes they found embarrassing. They had to ask other parents on the PACs, for example, for the application forms. They found that embarrassing. And they shared that they had to advocate for themselves as poor, and prove their poverty to school administration and to the others involved in intake in order to qualify. And they shared that they just found that entire process really debilitating and disempowering and stigmatizing. So the other bulk of what they shared around accessing school food programs was just a lack of clarity, transparency, and accountability led to uneven distribution of the program to the members of the community that they were in. They also talked a lot about their children, saying that they didn't want to access programs due to being singled out. So some of them were struggling because they wanted their kids and their youth to access the programs, and the kids were refusing. And they also talked about just, reinforcing inequities school to school, which is something I'll unpack a bit more in a minute. So here's a quote from one of the participants: "Universal school food will take out the stigma associated with school food. No more filling out a form and feeling like you are begging for food. You don't want the stigma of being the low-income student who accesses the program. Less than universal is stigmatizing for families and kids." So somebody responding to this notion of the universality. And somebody else said, "So the ideal school food program is free and universal with the possibility to opt out, with a lot of education for the children on food literacy." So this is a really strong theme in all of their input, which was this notion of having to opt out rather than opt in, and that was a much less barrier-full way of administrating programs because you didn't have to prove your eligibility. Okay, so next, there was a lot of collective emphasis of the power of opt-out programs rather than opt-in ones. They also talked a lot about their perception of being at inner city schools that were perceived as lower income. And some of them felt that they had been at others, they had had children at other schools, that their schools were the recipients of more charitable food, and other schools of means across the city or in other places had access to better school food. So they talked a lot about not wanting schools with communities with more people who are struggling to get the charity streams of food, that they wanted the equitable access to quality, healthy food. That really was a strong theme. And overall, they talked a lot about wanting to abandon and avoid the notion of charity food as school food. That school food is not about charity. It's not about targeting some individuals and others. And they really wanted to shift their children's relationship with school food and their relationship with school food and the culture around school food at their schools from this notion of charity. So they also felt very, very strongly, so we had many Indigenous mothers in all of these sessions, about the importance of the reconciliation and decolonizing process being reflected in all aspects of policy design and delivery at all schools. And that of course, the opportunities for their children to learn about the Indigenous relationship to land and water is a really important part of decolonizing our entire education systems. And they really quite passionately talked about school food programs as this very rich way in to much greater decolonizing work in our education system, which was fascinating to hear. So in terms of intake and assessment, I guess the higher level pieces to focus, to highlight would be the importance of confidentiality and anonymity around when it comes to eligibility. So making sure, they talked a lot about privacy violations and having to declare their incomes to other parents on the PAC and the humiliation there. The other piece was the confidentiality around application processes. One participant said that her child had refused to take a big yellow envelope out of her backpack that was the form to sign up for the school food program because all the other kids in the class knew what that yellow envelope meant. And the mother couldn't figure out why her child didn't seem to be accessing the school food program. It was because the child didn't want to deliver the envelope and they'd left it in their backpack for like weeks. So, it's hard to sometimes tell what little processes are stigmatizing or causing these feelings with people, which is why it was such a fantastic opportunity to talk to this group. So they talked a lot about not wanting their children to be included in a lot of the intake processes, that they felt that that was sort of putting their children in this really awkward position and foregrounding their economic status among their peers, which their children found humiliating. So one participant shared that her son wouldn't participate in the breakfast program because he feels like it's a charity, and he didn't want to be pitted against other students. But he loved the backpack program that they were a part of because the two of them, mother and son, volunteered in that program. So they felt connected to it and included, and there was a sense of stewardship and agency there. And so he was happy to participate in that program. And we really appreciate what she shared because that was a great contrast. So my other, the main piece to communicate from the research was just the importance, and I think that there are many fantastic school food programs already defined by this as in BC and across the country, but participants really reiterated this, that involvement is just absolutely key to a sense of belonging, and stewardship of programs creates a sense of community, an end to this passive receiving of charity that made the recipients really uncomfortable, creates an environment that promotes equitable input among diverse families and connection and sharing. They advocated for very strong parental involvement. Those with children in programs where they did have an opportunity to be involved, they were just much happier overall. And of course, they very much wanted their children involved in every aspect of the program, the programs from the gardens to the cooking, so that their children weren't just, receiving this sort of this passive handout of food because they were perceived as in need or low income and food insecure. And, they also talked an enormous amount about not just focusing on food security and food insecurity, that for parents and all parents, time and the time that it takes for food prep and shopping was a huge issue, especially with working lives and, parental lives being what they are. So somebody said to us, money isn't the only reason parents need the school food program. It is more than that. It's about convenience for parents. There is so much stigma around school and school food access. So let's get rid of the stigma by taking it off the plates of parents. And I thought that was very well put. So we just like to express our gratitude to Debbie Field and the Coalition for Healthy School Food, Samantha Gambling with the BC chapter for partnering and collaborating to carry out this community engagement in Vancouver. We also like to acknowledge the collaborative outreach support of Ruth Briggs and the Grandview Woodland Food Connection of Britannia, Ian Marcuse with Vancouver Neighborhood Food Networks, and Alexa Padulis of Fresh Roots Urban Farm Society, who helped us reach a lot of people who had an enormous amount to share. And we'd like to extend a special acknowledgement to Leona Brown, who is our then and current Indigenous coordinator, and who really impacted research design, scope, and outreach as our Indigenous peer researcher. And to the Tapestry Collective Co-op for this webinar opportunity. I don't know where my time is at, but that's the end. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Viveca. It is 4:03, and we had anticipated that your presentation would end at 4:04. So right on target. Thank you so much. We've had some great comments in the chat about how rich the slides are, and we just really appreciate your insight and the work that you've done so far. We're going to have a Q&A afterwards. So if people can take an opportunity to write down any questions you have, we'll be doing that through Menti. And I'm going to introduce Serena before you jump on there, Serena. So Serena Caner is the SD 83, which is Salmon Arm in the interior BC, school food coordinator, a registered dietitian, and president of the Shuswap Food Action Society. She has been a longtime grassroots advocate for local and resilient food systems, and she has worked in schools to create food-based opportunities for connection with seniors, food curriculum, and programs that feed students. She's been working with the community to develop a deep understanding of the recipients of food programming, and has developed programming that embodies the spirit of universal access to food with the constraints that many food coordinators face. I've known Serena for a long time, and I'm very proud to pass it over to her to talk to us about what has been going on in her community.
Thank you, Bonnie. And yes, That was very nice intro. And I am no longer the president of Shuswap Food Action Society, because it was going to make me go mental doing both jobs. So today I wanted to talk about reducing stigma in school food programs. And I really appreciated Viveca's introduction, because I think she really, what she shared is a lot of what we were hearing from our school food working group. And I think as schools, we understand a lot of what she's saying, but school systems are just really challenging to change. So I'm going to talk about some of the strategies that we've tried in our district, and hopefully just giving you guys some ideas. So I just wanted to acknowledge, so I am third generation settler to Canada, and I currently live and work on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded lands of the Secwepemc people. I just also want to acknowledge that I'm white, I'm privileged, I'm married, I have 2 children, and I have no lived experience of food insecurity. I'm a registered dietitian, and I have spent a lot of my life talking to people who have experienced food insecurity. And through my work with Shuswap Food Action Society, we have been in relationship with people experiencing food insecurity for a long time. And that's what drew me to this work. I've been involved informally in school meal programs since 2015, which was when my own kids started school. So I was, the breakfast coordinator at my daughter's school when she started kindergarten, and then Shuswap Food Action has operated a number of different styles of food literacy programs as well as school meal programs since 2018. And now just this year I took on the role as the school food program coordinator for our district. So just to give you guys some local context, because I know that all school districts are quite different. And so what works in my district is not going to work in your district. But SC83, we've got 25 schools, really large geographic area, a mix of cities, towns, and villages. About 6,800 students, 20% identifying as Indigenous, and the rest of them are mostly white. We do have other racialized communities, but they are minorities. And then 20% have identified as having diverse needs. So the median income is 90,000 in our region, but we have areas, communities with very low incomes, and we are sort of below BC's average. Okay, so I just want to acknowledge some of the universal barriers that I'm sure everyone on this call who works in this school experiences. So one is inadequate funding. We've been given funding that is adequate for a targeted population, but again, we're trying not to run targeted programs that cause stigma. So how can you make a universal program with targeted funding? Lack of school capacity. So, there's inadequate staffing, infrastructure, the administration of programs is hard. So every school is feeling that a bit overwhelmed right now. Time. So, the 20-minute lunch hour in elementary school is especially challenging. School culture is a barrier. So, a lot of schools haven't run any food programs in the past. You get teachers and principals and everybody who feels like this is a big drag, and that and even sometimes a distraction to their teaching. There's a general lack of knowledge and training in food systems and food service, and I think the food system is in the general public, and the food service in particular in school. So schools don't really know how to run efficient programs that feed lots of kids in a small amount of time. And then the other challenge is the different diets. So, if everybody was happy with the same meal, it would be a lot easier to run school meal programs. But there's always allergies and cultural differences, and it's really challenging. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, you know, we're all kind of in the same place. So the kind of what we're trying to do in our district is this idea that it takes a community to feed a child. And this idea that it's a collective responsibility of all of ours to make equity happen in our schools. So it's not going to involve one person or it's everybody. So some of the strategies that we've tried, one is building school capacity with paid positions. And I know some districts haven't done this, and I just think that is crazy. So we have all of our schools were offered school meal worker positions, and they got between 45 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on the type of program they were running. Some of the benefits that, besides the clear benefit, is that, you know, EAs, one of the #1 challenges with EAs, retaining EAs in the profession, is that they don't make a living wage. A lot of EAs have a second job that they go to after school. So the school meal worker position, it extends their day from being, you know, 5.5 hours to, it could be, you know, 6.5, 7 hour a day job, which makes their salaries closer to a living wage. And I also think schools are being really naive if they think that school meal programs are just happening. I mean, they're happening without paid positions at a cost to other things happening with schools, and it affects students. So a lot of schools that don't have paid positions are using their supervision time. And we all know that kids actually do need supervision during mealtime. Or, you know, they're supposed to be with students during that time. So they're going out of the classroom to get stuff ready. So it's actually weakening the schools when we really need to be building capacity within the school. The second thing is and Viveca spoke to this, is engaging authentic voices. So, you know, I know that I'm not an authentic voice in this world. So we actually created a school food working group. So we have about 10 parents. We pay them to come to meetings. We eat together. We discuss, you know, what they think about, you know, all sorts of topics. And it's facilitated by Rise Up Indigenous Wellness. And Shuswap Food Action got the funding to get it started. And it's, you know, it's been a really humbling and wonderful experience. And it really backs what, you know, when you're telling principals and other staff what you think needs to happen, if you've got this group with these voices that are saying these things, then it provides buy-in. The third thing in our district, so racism is an issue, obviously, in all school districts, and ours is included. And we have been meeting with the Indigenous Ed staff, and one of the things that has come up over the years is how that they're using their cultural funds to pay for food. And so when these funding came available, what we decided is there wasn't going to be like the Indigenous Ed food and then the other students' food, that everyone's going to go through the same process, and we didn't separate the funding. So everyone orders on the same spreadsheet, everyone's following the same rules, and I think that's really helped. There was a lot of misinformation about, oh, you know, Indigenous Ed gets so much money and blah, 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 and it's not true. So it really helped clarify that. And also, I've seen that there was some great collaboration between staff. So in September, I had, you know, Indigenous Ed workers asking for little mini fridges to put in their room. But then now they're like, oh, no, we don't need that. We're just sharing the fridge with the breakfast program. And like some of them are now ordering together and, you know, doing programs together. So it's kind of been a really great way for us to collaborate together and try to reduce those sort of lines. Creating a culture of universalism in school. So I think until you see a great meal program has a feeling. And, you know, you walk into it and you're like, oh, this is what it's supposed to feel like. And some schools have never experienced that. And so we wanted to give schools the opportunity to see how cool it is when everyone's eating together. So we offered these $1,000 feast grants, so that a school could, and $1,000, I mean, some schools got a bit more if they needed it. You know, that's not enough to feed a large school, but just the idea. And so the picture is one of the high schools did a Christmas, like a holiday dinner, and they actually brought tables and put them out in the hallway, and then the staff helped serve all the kids, and the the culinary arts class cooked most of the food. And anyway, it was just it's a really great way to build school spirit and show people, you know, what this is about. The other thing is offering options. So we have a soup program that runs in 15 different schools that Shuswap Food Action Society operates, and not all schools are the same, right? Some schools are big, some schools are small, some schools are really happy to do this, some schools are hesitant. So this program, schools have really been able to find their own way of participating. So this picture here of the kids, so this is a really small elementary school, so the kids are actually involved in serving, you know, they do the dishes, everything's reusable, they're not using compostables. Any leftover soup, the school has a draw, and they draw names, and the student who gets the name drawn is the one who takes it home at the end of the day. So they found a creative way of dealing with leftovers, and it's great. The other school here, this is like a 300 student middle school. And they were kind of overwhelmed by the idea. And what they've done is, you know, they pre-serve everything. They put it in bins for each, they organize it for each classroom, and then they're only participating once a month. So again, we're just building their capacity over time. You know, what we hope is as schools kind of get used to it, that they'll want to do it more often. Building excitement around less expensive foods. So I think this is really important. We've worked a lot of trying to make soup cool in our district because, as you know, soup is the cheapest way to feed people. And, you know, it's also nutritious and it's warm and it crosses cultures. And I just think soup is great. You can use local ingredients. So some of the things we did, you know, we had a drawing contest for our soup program. The one here on the left, we had the kids were allowed to invite their parents one day. So we had invite your parents for lunch for soup day at one of the schools. So you kind of have to be creative, but, you know, to get student buy-in, it's really helpful to be thinking, always sort of thinking of new ways of making these foods cool. You know, one of the things that's come up a lot in our school food working group is language around, and Viveca spoke to this, but, you know, words like in need or vulnerable, or, you know, they're very stigmatizing, and people don't want to participate in that. We've in our district had a real challenge with this because it's hard to offer universal programs when you know you don't have universal funding. So I think it comes from schools being afraid that they're going to run out of money, that they make these criteria, not recognizing that no one is then going to participate. And I think people get it, right? Like, I think if you give people the option to pay, if they can, I think they will. And so I think we need to stop thinking that everyone's out to kind of abuse the system. I don't think they are. And our experience has been that that's not the case. So the other thing that's been really evident is that parents don't want to ask their principals. They don't want that to be how they get support. And in our district, that's sort of been the traditional ways. If you know, for affordability funding or school meal subsidies, you go to your principal and you're like, oh, I can't afford to pay. And then you get signed up. And you know, people are like, we don't want to do that. I'm not going to do that. So finding other ways of registering, and I took notes during Viveca's on some of her ideas. The one suggestion that came up in our working group was the blue form that everyone fills out in the beginning of the year that confirms like your address and has like your school fees, like that first package, you know, if there was just one box where parents could just check off saying, I need food support or something like that, then that was sort of what they thought would be nice. And then the final thing is, you know, what we call sort of food neutrality, but, you know, there's a lot of judgment around food and it's often staff and volunteers speaking inappropriately about food around students, not recognizing where they come from and that, you know, the options in their lunch might be all their family has. So really avoiding labeling food as good and bad, judging food, telling kids what order they have to eat their lunch, or just making comments like, oh, did you see so-and-so's lunch? So terrible. Or teachers sending emails home being like, you can only send fruit and vegetables for a snack, or, you know, like anything like that. They don't need it. Don't do it. And then the last thing was the finding discrete ways of administering mixed payment subsidy programs. So I think most of us can't offer like when we're talking about a high school that has, you know, 600 kids, we don't have the money for a universal program, but we don't have the capacity. So I think most schools can only feed about, you know, 100, 200 kids in a lunchtime. And so if you've got, you know, 600 to 1,000 children at your school, there's just no way. So what do you do? So we've used online ordering systems. They're great from like reducing admin time and no one knows who's paid what. So they're great for that. I've got feedback that, you know, some people don't have access to the internet. Most online ordering, you have to use a Visa or a MasterCard, and some people don't have credit. And they're also a lot of work. Like they do save you a lot of work and they give you a lot of data, but you get a billion questions and like, Johnny's sick today, can I get a refund? And oh, by the way, you know, like, so they're not perfect. We tried pay what you can models. People are a bit confused by that. I think they don't understand it. And some people want to be told how much they should pay. I feel like people, especially people who probably could use a subsidy but haven't traditionally needed to, are especially sensitive to these kinds of things where you almost need to have some kind of criteria just so that they feel okay paying less. Creating safe eating spots in schools where students know they can get free food if needed. So what we've tried at some of our high schools is that we just send a certain number, like 20 free servings of whatever is being served in the cafeteria to this room and to that room. And there's no name attached to those meals, but whoever shows up and needs lunch gets to eat them. Again, not a perfect system, but there's no administration and kids who are hungry show up. There's no criteria, there's no recording of anyone's names. So it's safe. I think it works well. But then you don't know if you're hitting everybody, right? So there's going to be kids who are hungry and show up and there's nothing left. Punch cards, kids lose punch cards. I don't know. I like the idea of punch cards, but how can you, and then like if you keep them at the cafeteria, then it takes time to look for them and find them and punch them. So I don't know, maybe QR codes for kids who have phones or, you know, something like that. And then the other thing we've tried is the program-based subsidies. So in our high schools, you know, anyone who's in the bridge program, anyone who's in the LR has like in the LR program, they get offered free meals. And that again isn't a perfect system, but often, you know, families in those programs have barriers to accessing food. So, and they tend to eat in their own area. They're not eating in a general cafeteria. So then we just send the food there and no one knows and no one sees. And again, not perfect, but something we've tried. So again, I just wanted to end on equity is a collective responsibility. You know, it has to be, I think we just need to build awareness with staff, with students, with parents, and sort of work out ways that we can work with what we have.
Thank you so much, Serena. We've had 2 presenters and their presentations to the minute when to our agenda, so I'm just counting this as a huge success. And again, the content you shared, I feel like, is so grounded in the realities that are happening in schools, and so many great questions in the chat already, some of which we've moved over to the Menti, I see. So what I'm going to do now is share my screen again so that we can see the Menti and give you some instructions. So some folks have already added their questions to the Menti, but if you haven't done so already, you can open up a new browser or a browser on your phone, go to the Menti, you can put your questions in, and you can also read the questions that are already there and give the thumbs up to ones that you might also have. And because there are quite a number of people on this call, we're going to go in order of the top sort of thumbs up questions, because we want to make sure that the most pressing questions for the most people are answered first. I will also take this opportunity to let you know that we're going to be keeping this Zoom room open for 15 or 20 minutes after we officially end. And so if your question didn't get answered, you can take that time as sort of our hallway conversation time to direct message someone or chat with one of the speakers or one of the people from the BC chapter. So don't panic if your question isn't answered, but we are going to use the Menti and the thumbs up to answer the most urgent questions. And while folks are kind of orienting themselves to the Q&A, I wanted to bring back Brent, who does amazing work as not only an advocate and organizer, but as a school food person who's on the ground every day. So I'm going to ask Brent to share a few reflections and ask the first question to start us off, and then we will go to the Menti questions. So take it away, Brent.
Thank you, Bonnie, and thank you, Viveca and Serena, for that stimulating conversations. And I'm really excited to be digging into this, and really felt a lot of what you shared resonated with my own experiences co-founding Lunch Lab. And I love the emphasis on student and family contribution, because when I think of what is the opposite of stigma, it's contribution, it's collective responsibility, right? And to me, the vision of, yeah, we're not in a place where we can be truly universal yet, but how do we build that in a way that looks at all the things that we want rather than just avoids the things? And I think we want to look at how we avoid stigma, but what is the opposite of stigma? And I think beyond that too, it's creating programs that have that feeling that you mentioned, Serena, and where students really all want to benefit. And I say this as a teacher, lunch programs that are engaged and breakfast programs that support students and integrate learning and contribution, you wouldn't leave a couple of students out of an engaging learning opportunity or a field study that they were going to go on, right? This is an opportunity we have every day for students to kind of plug in and be part of the opportunity for enjoyment, learning, to experience that connection care at school. This is something that benefits all students. So how do we create that so that stigmas, yeah, there's practical things around online payment and not identification of students, but how do we build that bigger picture? So my question to the two of you, and both of you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'm going to ask you to kind of frame this more as advice to those here that are working in school districts or community partners. As we're looking at engaging authentic voices of, I'll say, students and parents around stigma, because I think they both have different perceptions, and stigma is really socially constructed. So we need to understand the social perspectives of those who are involved. What would you recommend to those, whether that's like a school food working group at a district level, or like what did you call them? Like focus groups? What advice would you give to folks as we're really looking at rolling out school food programs? How do they do a good job of engaging authentic voices around this?
Well, I guess I can go, Viveca. It was really helpful to have an honorarium when you're, I think, I was sort of in a position because I worked for Shuswap Food Action Society beforehand, and we do a lot of food security projects. I already had relationships with some of people in community, and I was sort of already seen as sort of a safe person for some of these families. So I, and then because we engaged Indigenous Rise Up to be the facilitator, and obviously they're Indigenous, you know, they were safe people for a lot of the Indigenous families in our district. And so, yeah, I think the two things is, you know, find people who already have the relationship with some of the people you're trying to target. And I think, finding an honorary, like paying, because they have multiple barriers, you know, they might have to pay a babysitter to come, you know, they might need to borrow their friend's car. So if you're giving them money to be there, it sort of helps them get through some of those barriers that they may have. And then offering food is always, for anybody, you know, a tasty meal is always a good incentive to get anywhere.
And I would say, to build on everything you just said, Serena, I don't have a lot to add, but I would say, you know, based on what came through this one, you know, larger community engagement we did in East Vancouver, the notion of at least an initial or one time, or if your program has never done it, like not an audit, but you know, a beginning and an end community engagement with the recipients of your program to really find out what their experience has been. And, you know, we have a really good structure that works for that. I love the model that, Serena, that you have in place, where there's the goal is to have the input built in to the program design and model. But I think this notion of, if you haven't gone to the recipients yet, like in a formalized way, to do that. And I would reiterate what you said, Serena, I think 100%. So we call it removing barriers to participation. So childcare, hot food, hot nutritious food, always. Child minding room, but also at-home childcare, nutritious food for the children, childminders, and experience child, and then transportation coverage and an honoraria. And the other thing I would recommend is a mixed methods approach to engagement, because, you know, a lot of people are neurodiverse. Maybe sitting in a room with other parents you don't know isn't going to work. So you could have some in-person focus groups using a classroom in the evening with food, and parents come and that's their cup of tea. That's fine. You could have one-to-one engagement option, and then a survey. So not everybody wants to share their views in front of other people or with other people. And that, you know, depending on literacy level, I don't know if a survey feels comfortable, but to have a few options that people can choose. But I would highly recommend that. And then hopefully the goal would be to have to create a structure for continuing input from people. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to turn to our Menti questions. Thanks everyone for participating in this. I see lots of great questions and some good use of the voting thumbs up too. So the question that's coming up now is, what does education for staff and students around using neutral language to describe food look like? It feels challenging to get folks to rethink a lot of morality talk or associations they've been taught. So yeah, I'll toss it over to Serena, you or Viveca.
All right. Yeah, this is, I mean, we've got a bunch of public health dietitians on this call, and they would be probably the experts. I know they've created a lot of really good resources. And maybe someone could put that in the chat. The Teach Foods First is a good resource for teachers. The guidelines that I think are coming out soon also have talked a bit about the food neutrality. It's really hard because we live in this like diet culture, and a lot of us have been, food education has really changed. What I tell teachers is that we don't talk about nutrition. We don't talk about calories or fat or protein or when kids are young. So basically, I think it's like, you know, grade 10 and less, like we don't talk about nutrition. We're just engaging kids with hands-on learning experiences. So cooking, growing food, you know, tasting food, that, you know, that's what we're talking about, because kids' brains aren't able to decipher, you know, everything's so is black and white for little kids. And even if it's not what you say, how they interpret that information and tell their parents, it might be completely different than what you meant, but that's how they heard it. And I hear that repeatedly from parents, like, oh, my kid came home today and, you know, they learned that they're going to die because there's red food dye in Doritos or what. And of course the teacher probably didn't say that, but that's how they interpreted the conversation. So, and the other thing is like, and again, this is this collective responsibility, but I think every person who works in a school should be aware of not everyone has the same options when it goes to the grocery store, right? So income is, you know, the number one, you know, determinant of what kind of food you eat. And so it's not, you know, we talk a lot about the division of responsibility in schools, and schools, you know, they're responsible for, you know, what's served at school and when it's served, but parents are responsible for what comes from home. And so your responsibility is never to talk about the food coming from home. That's never the school's job. And that's a really easy way to start the conversation with a staff member or with a teacher, is that we don't talk about the food that comes from someone's home. Okay. So, and then again, in the classroom, you know, the student is allowed to choose how much and if they participate. So not trying to micromanage how kids are eating their lunches, not giving them tips on nutrition. It's just recognizing that that's not the school's job.
I just wanted to add just one quick thing, is that I'm as the question was being asked, this like memories of what people have told me at different times were reverberating around in my head. And I was thinking what a long-term member said to me once. She was like, you know, everywhere I go, you know, very, very low income family would get grocery shopping at the dollar store, right? So like cans and craft dinner and pieces like this. That was, I saw that happening. But she said, everybody tells me what not to eat, like what's bad about what I mean, like what not to eat, but I still don't know what I should eat. And I think there's this like, she was sort of saying, you know, she's like, well, you know, another kid told me, you know, that pizza pops are bad. And I feed my kids, we get pizza pops and it's an after school snack that they access. And so, you know, there was this shame and stigma now. It's like, oh, you know, I'm a bad mom for feeding my kid pizza pops, but the kids want pizza pops. Whereas she had said to me, you know, why don't we work on, like, why can't the organizations tell us what we should be eating, not telling us what's wrong with the food that we might still like? So it's like, okay, pizza pops, but is there a side of carrots or whatever it is, you know? And so I just wanted to bring that in because I've heard that a lot over the years.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. So, well, maybe there's one last question that I'll get maybe each of you, if you have, if you want to weigh in on it, just to take a minute to respond to. And this question is, what are the best practices for school food programs to ensure students receiving subsidies are not identified or singled out in any way?
Well, one best practice is to have only one person. Like the more people in the pot, the more likely word gets out. So and we haven't done this in our district, but I'm kind of advocating that, you know, maybe as my role or someone's role is like, you are the school meal person, and all those subsidy questions go from the parent directly to you and not through the school. I mean, the school can be one way if you're comfortable going to your principal, great. But there needs to be like the plan B. And I just think it's really hard, even if staff or anyone says that they're not going to tell it, like just word always spreads. And you end up having to do a lot of it. Like I've had EAs who are like, oh no, they shouldn't be getting a free lunch. I see their lunch. They have a really nice lunch every day. Or like, you know, sometimes people think they're the expert on these families because of what they see or the clothes they're wearing or the car their parents drive. And it's really hard to change that. So again, with the spirit of universalism, you know, we're just telling staff, you know, it's not your job to decide who is participating or who, you know, gets what. And again, that's why we want universal programs. But when you can't offer them, and they're, if we can only subsidize a certain number of people, my feeling is the least number of people who know, the better. I don't know what Viveca thinks.
I think you're definitely the expert on the implementation of these things, Serena, so I don't have anything further to add.
Awesome. Okay. So thank you so much. And I noted that there are quite a few questions in the chat and also in the Menti about curriculum and resources and things like that. So what we're going to do now is do a 10-minute breakout group. And what our intent is with this breakout group is to kind of ferment our ideas about what practices you're curious about trying and what are the barriers you face. And as a sneak preview, I want to let you know that we're also going to be asking folks to share resources that they have around curriculum, reducing stigma, and we're going to kind of create a little compendium to send out just from the knowledge of the people on this call. So the knowledge and resources that you might have at your fingertips on the computer here. So this breakout group is going to be in groups of 4 or 5. We'd like you to introduce yourself, talk about these questions, and we'll come back after 10 minutes. We also wanted to say that if you're feeling like it's not accessible for you this afternoon to do a breakout group, that is okay. You don't need to join it. You can get yourself an after-school snack if you like, journal about what resonated with you from the presenters. But we wanted to give folks the opportunity to chat in smaller groups if they would like to make some connections. So I'll stop sharing this. Krista, are we ready for the breakout groups? Awesome. Okay, we'll see you back in 10 minutes. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm thinking that most everyone is back. And I hope you enjoyed your breakout groups and that you had success meeting some new folks or maybe chatting with folks you already know. So we're going to bring it in for a landing here with 3 final engagement questions through Menti. So it's a great time to whip out your phone or your other browser. And we would just love to hear from your breakout group and from the things that you heard from the speakers, what practices you're trying or curious about trying. So I'm going to give folks about 3 minutes to kind of distill down some of the best ideas that you heard about those practices. And again, if Menti isn't working for someone or you would rather put it in the chat, you can feel free to either put it in the chat and Krista and Lindsay will paste it over to Menti, or you can direct message them. Great. Opt in instead of opt out. Reviewing language of parent communications. That's excellent. Having dietitians involved with educational sessions. Yes. Invite parents to come for breakfast one day. Love it. School food program app experiences. Yes, I enjoyed that suggestion from Serena as well. Pro-D session on neutral language. Consider new and exciting ways to advertise food programs. Universal top-ups available for all students. Parenting caregiver engagement that is paid. Curious about how different districts do intake and assessment. Involving students and parents in food prep and distribution, inviting parents over, trying a focus group and engaging parents, and having an advisory or focus group. Excellent. Wanting to try different meal options in schools, looking for suggestions on bowls, servings that are not compostable. Starting a subsidized school box program using an online ordering platform that makes it so nobody knows subsidized boxes exist. That's great. Monthly tasting with lesson plans. Oh, I love that. Excellent. Okay. Well, Viveca, you have a comment in the chat. That's awesome. Maybe we'll add that into the Menti as well. So I'm going to switch to the next question. So maybe I'll just give like 10 seconds for people to finish typing whatever you are typing in the Menti. Next, we're going to look at a word cloud. What are the barriers that you face? So, and if there was something that you wanted to say to the previous question and didn't get the chance, again, feel free to put it in the Zoom chat. So this, what are the barriers that you face? We're just asking for kind of one-word answers around what are some of the primary things that that are challenges for you in implementing programs. Infrastructure, imagination, inconsistency, not enough funding, limited staff capacity, culturally responsive, cold holding and storage. Yeah, I'm seeing lots of like finance, infrastructure, staff, personnel. Behaviorism, imagination, freezer space, funding. Great. Okay, and 26 responses. Okay, I think I'm going to move to the next question. So again, I'm going to talk slowly as I transition us to the next question, which is, what are the resources related to reducing stigma do you refer to? So for this next question, we are going to give 3 minutes, and we really want you to like open a new web browser, get that blog article. If there's a report that you're referring to, copy and paste the link into this Menti prompt, and this will be something that we're hoping will be a valuable resource now, and potentially the start of a larger compendium that can be shared out around resources related to stigma. And this can be curriculum resources. There's been a number of really important things shared in the chat already, so anything that you think could be important for other folks to benefit from, we want to have it in this list. Awesome, thanks for that link, Serena. We'll make sure that that gets included. This is great. So many good links in here already. Okay, so we'll end with just a couple of announcements about upcoming education opportunities, ways that you can deepen some of the things that we've talked about here, and new things, new topics that are coming up from the BC chapter. So I'm gonna again switch away from this Menti, but you know where to find us if you want to add to it. So the next webinar that is happening, that is facilitated also by Krista and I and the BC chapter, is on involving youth in school food programs. And that webinar is happening on Thursday, May 23rd. It's at the same time. There is a QR code on the screen. You can snap it right now so that you can register for it. The BC chapter did a survey of school food coordinators before we hosted this webinar, and reducing stigma and involving youth were the number 1 and number 2 things that folks were saying that they wanted to learn. So we're hoping that that this is helpful for you, and that this next one will be equally as engaging, and we would love to see you there. So that's PSA for that, and I'll turn it over to Sue-Ann to talk about the Lunch and Learn.
Thanks, Bonnie. Hi, everybody. I'm Sue-Ann, the Indigenous lead for the BC chapter. We have a lunch and learn next Tuesday. It's from noon till 1 Mountain Time, and we're just going to be talking about Indigenous school food programs, kind of how the funding structure works here in BC through the BC Tripartite Agreement. Hoping that can be a great model for other provinces and territories, because it does ensure that provincial funding to public schools makes its way to First Nation schools. And yeah, we'll just be kind of going over that, how the structure is and what that looks like in advocacy, and telling a few stories about the wonderful programs that are happening here in BC. And
Excellent.
that's that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, and then Krista, can I ask you to paste the survey link? So we just have a quick webinar evaluation survey that we would love for you to fill out. It's 2 questions, and it would really help us as we gear up to host the next one, and if there's ongoing webinars. So we would love for you to fill that out as we're coming to a close here. And I want to invite Brent to just say a few words. For those of you who don't know, although I think she said it at the beginning, Sam is ending her time with the BC chapter, and we just wanted to give a special shout out and thank you as we close today.
And yes, I honor and privilege to say this, Sam. We had to sneaky do this on you because we're going to thank you at the members meeting next week, but not everyone will be there. Plug for the members meeting, but want to just thank and acknowledge, Sam, for all of your steadfast leadership that has got us to this place. And you have been integral to all the successes of the BC chapter and the coalition as a whole. And you can be really proud of that. And we're going to miss you. And we know you're not gone just yet, but we want to make sure that you are properly acknowledged and thanked for all that you've done for school food in BC and Canada, and the way that all of us benefit from that.
That's so nice. Thank you so much. That's a photo of me drinking a glass of wine and reading a book, and that's what I plan on doing over the summer. So
Amen.
It's been
well deserved.
Thank you all. Know it's been great to be here, and really appreciate this webinar and the ongoing conversations. I will definitely stay plugged into this conversation because it's such an important new social program in our province and hopefully across Canada now with this federal investment. So exciting times, and yeah, thanks everyone for being here, and thanks Brent for the words.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sam. I'd love to take everyone off mute, but I'm not going to. It would be nice to have just a virtual applause from the crowd. So with that, we are going to keep the Zoom room open for 15 minutes or so. If there's someone who you met in the breakout group that you want to message and get their contact information, if you want to stay on while you fill out the evaluation survey, that would be great. And if you have any questions for the speakers that you want to ask now, the floor is yours. So I will stop sharing my screen and say thank you to all for all the people who attended who need to go now, and happy to answer any questions. Awesome. Okay, we'll see you back in 10 minutes.